Sarah rushed to get ready, but before she could leave, Alan pulled her into a rare morning hug. His hand slid from her back down to her hips, and he noticed something unusual. She wasn't wearing any underwear, and this time, it didn't excite him. Lifting the hem of her skirt, Alan questioned her sharply. "Why aren't you properly dressed?" "Sarah," she pulled away, responding quickly, "You'll understand everything tonight," and dashed out the door. Alan stood, shocked, before reaching for his phone on the kitchen table and typing out a message. "Alan, she's gone. Looks like something big is happening today. Emma, my guy will keep tabs on her." It had started 2 days earlier during Alan's night shift. After responding to a minor traffic accident and ensuring everyone was safe, they took a short break. Alan went to the men's room, where a sudden sharp pain hit him, causing him to cry out in agony as he doubled over. Emergency technician Brendan, hearing the noise, rushed in. "Alan, what's going on?" he asked. Alan, still hunched over, pointed towards the urinal. Brendan grimaced at the sight of a greenish discharge. "That doesn't look good," Brendan remarked. "You know what this means, right?" Alan nodded, still in pain. "Yeah, I'll handle it," he muttered. "Thanks, Brendan. I appreciate it. I'll visit the clinic in the morning. I don't want to go public at our hospital." As his shift ended, Alan made his way to Mount Sire Hospital, a nearby facility where he knew no familiar faces would see him. The waiting room was blessedly empty, and he was quickly brought back for tests. An hour later, Alan sat nervously in an exam room when a nurse came in, her face contorted with discomfort as she took his vitals. "The doctor will be with you soon," she said. A few moments later, an older man in a white coat entered. "Mr. Miller, I'm Dr. Smith," he introduced himself. "I have some unfortunate news. Your tests indicate you have a severe sexually transmitted infection." Alan's face hardened. "Is it chlamydia or gonorrhea?" he asked flatly. "You have chlamydia," the doctor confirmed. "I'll prescribe strong antibiotics, but you'll need to abstain from sex for at least a week after treatment. If symptoms persist, see your regular doctor." Dr. Smith paused before continuing. "I need to ask about your recent sexual partners for contact tracing." Alan sighed. "Just one." "My wife." The doctor's expression softened. "She'll need to be tested too, even if she shows no symptoms." "Untreated chlamydia can lead to severe health issues," the doctor added. "I also have to report this to the health department." As Alan left the hospital, his mind raced. Sarah had given him an STD. Alan called his parents. His father answered cheerfully. "Hey, son, shouldn't you be at work?" Alan sighed. "Dad, I have a problem." "Can I come over?" "Of course, son. We'll brew some coffee. See you soon." Alan had been raised in a devout religious household alongside his sister Denise. Their parents instilled strong moral values, including no sex before marriage. Alan adhered to these teachings, remaining a virgin until his wedding night with Sarah at age 23. Sarah had been understanding of his inexperience and taught him how to please her. Their sex life had been fulfilling, though not overly passionate. They had their first daughter, Lorna, a year into marriage, followed by Gloria 14 months later. After that, Sarah had her tubes tied, content with their family of 4. As Alan pulled into his parents' driveway, he braced himself for a difficult conversation. His father greeted him warmly at the door. "Come on in, son. Your mother's got coffee ready." Alan hugged his mother in the kitchen before they all sat down at the table. After saying grace, his father gave him a serious look. "What's troubling you?" Alan took a deep breath. "I just got back from the doctor. I have chlamydia," his mother gasped. "Oh my word," his father's face grew stern. "Did you cheat on Sarah?" "No, Dad." "Never," Alan replied firmly. His father nodded. "I believe you." "So what now?" Alan slumped in his chair. "I think I'll have to get a divorce." His mother worried about how it would affect the girls, but Alan reassured her that Lorna and Gloria would understand one day. His father, after a moment of contemplation, added, "Adultery is grounds for divorce. I'll call Emma Hawkins. She's a family lawyer from our church. She helped Peter when he found out his wife was cheating with her boss's security guards. You're not alone in this, Alan. Stay strong." Alan felt a wave of relief as his father made the call, grateful for his parents' support. Within minutes, Alan had an afternoon appointment with Emma. "Bring your financial records and tax returns from the last few years," his father advised. "She'll need to review everything." "Thanks, Dad," Alan said. "I'll head home to gather the paperwork." His mother hugged him tightly. "We're here for you, sweetheart. This will all work out in God's plan." At home, Alan began sorting through files. That's when he discovered that Sarah had filed separate tax returns about 8 years ago. Digging further, he found large bonuses and commissions he had never known about, as well as a hidden bank account with almost $4 million in it. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah working late tonight. "Don't wait up." Alan's jaw tightened as he typed a curt reply. "Okay." Sarah's job as a stockbroker on Wall Street often involved late-night dinners with clients and company events, but now Alan viewed these activities with new suspicion. He gathered his documents and headed to Emma's office. The receptionist, a striking blonde, greeted him warmly. "I have a 2:30 appointment with Emma Hawkins," Alan said. She smiled and led him to Emma's office. Emma stood to shake his hand. "Good to see you, Alan. Can I get you some coffee?" "That would be great. Thanks." Emma turned to her receptionist. "2 coffees, please, and check if we have any butter pecan creamers left." She turned back to Alan. "Your father called me earlier. What's going on?" Alan sighed deeply. "This morning, I found out my wife has been cheating on me." Alan sat back, feeling drained. "I always thought we had a strong marriage," he said, shaking his head. "So did I," he continued, recounting the events of the morning, ending with his discovery of Sarah's hidden bank account. Emma listened carefully, taking notes as he spoke. When Alan finished, she leaned in. "Let me explain how divorce works in this state. It's not about justice, it's about money, how much you have, and how much her lawyer can get. Even with clear evidence of infidelity, you need solid proof." Alan frowned. "What about the STD?" Emma shook her head. "Her lawyer could argue you got it somewhere else. It all depends on what the judge believes. As for the secret account, she could claim it's a surprise retirement fund or something else. To me, it looks like an exit strategy, but proving intent will be difficult." Alan slumped in his chair. "So I'm out of options?" "Not at all," Emma reassured him. "I know an excellent private investigator who can start surveillance today. If she's still cheating, we'll catch her in the act. It's pricey, but you'll have undeniable evidence for court. Do you want to go ahead with it?" Alan nodded. "Let's do it." "Great," Emma replied. "I'll need all the details on Sarah's car, make, model, license plate. Do you know where she is right now?" Alan pulled out his phone. "I installed a tracking app when she lost her phone last year. Let me check." After a few moments, he said, "Got her. She's at a house up north." He showed Emma the address. "Perfect," Emma said, jotting it down. She called the investigator and sent him the details while Alan waited anxiously. "All set," Emma said after hanging up. "We should know something soon. Now, let's talk logistics. You have 2 teenage daughters, right?" "Yes. Lorna is 14 and Gloria is 13, Alan confirmed. "Do you want to pursue custody?" "Absolutely," Alan said firmly. "It won't be easy. Courts tend to favor the mother, but we can try." "Who's been the primary caregiver?" "Me," Alan answered. "Sarah's rarely home in the evenings." "Good," Emma nodded. "Are you certain the girls are biologically yours?" Alan stiffened. "Pretty sure." "Does it really matter?" "I'm on their birth certificates, and I've raised them their whole lives." Emma's tone softened. "I understand, but knowing for sure could help our case. Here's a lab that does discrete DNA testing." She handed him a business card. "What about your house?" "It's in a family trust. No mortgage," Alan replied. "Excellent. That simplifies things. We'll still need to split other assets 5050. I'll give you a checklist of everything we need to account for." Alan nodded, feeling overwhelmed. "Is there anything else I should do now?" "Not at this moment," Emma answered. "We'll start the paperwork, but let's wait to see what the investigator finds. You can start gathering the asset information, though." "Should I talk to Sarah about the STD?" Alan asked. "Not a bad idea," Emma said, smiling slightly. "Tell her to get tested. It legally protects you to inform her." She handed him the checklist and lab card. "That's all for now. Get these tasks done, and I'll be in touch once we have the investigator's report." Her expression softened. "Alan, I know this is tough, but try not to act impulsively. Things will get better." "Thanks," Emma," Alan said, shaking her hand. He paid the receptionist before leaving, stopping by the lab to pick up a DNA test kit, and then heading to the bank to verify the details of Sarah's secret account. Back home, Alan sat at the kitchen table, staring into his coffee. Most men would turn to alcohol right now, but Alan had never touched it, a family rule he had always followed. He thought back to that morning, holding his wife, unaware of her betrayal. "You'll understand tonight," Sarah had said. Alan messaged Emma, telling her he suspected Sarah was making her move. Later that afternoon, the front door flew open, and his daughters rushed in. "Daddy, you're home," Lorna exclaimed, hugging him. "Are you okay?" Gloria asked. "Why aren't you at work?" Alan sighed. "Can you both pack a bag? You're going to stay with Grandma and Grandpa for a few days." "What's wrong?" "Did you and Mum have a fight?" Gloria asked. Alan hesitated. "Not exactly." "Something's wrong, but we haven't thought about it yet." Lorna's eyes widened in realization. "You caught her cheating, didn't you?" Alan was surprised. "What makes you say that?" Lorna looked down. "I've overheard some of Mum's phone calls." She giggles like a schoolgirl. "It's weird." Alan pulled her into a hug. "It's okay that you didn't tell me sooner, sweetheart. But you can always come to me with anything." He hugged both daughters tightly. "But first, I need to swab your cheeks for a DNA test." "A DNA test?" Gloria asked, glancing at the kit on the table. "My lawyer's idea," Alan explained. "You don't think we're really yours?" Lorna's voice wavered. "Of course I do," Alan reassured her. "But we need to be 100% certain for legal reasons." "So you're really getting a divorce?" Lorna asked, sadness in her voice. Alan nodded slowly. "There's no chance you can forgive her?" Gloria asked. Alan's jaw clenched. "It's not likely. She left me with a parting gift." After taking DNA samples from the girls and himself, Alan sent them upstairs to pack. "Don't forget your homework," he reminded them. At his parents' house, Alan hugged the girls goodbye and promised to call them later. After dinner, his phone rang. It was Emma. "We've got some updates from the investigator. Your wife's been busy 3 different men since 1 p.m. Alan was speechless. "What kind of evidence do we have?" he asked quietly. "I'm sending everything to your email," Emma said. "It's more than enough for the divorce." Alan hung up and opened his email. He played the audio file first, a man's voice. "I see you're married." The sound of rings tapping a glass. Sarah's laugh. For now a pause. "You're wearing a ring too. My wife and I have an open marriage," the man explained. "Well, mine's not open," Sarah replied. "But I take my liberties where I can." "Your husband doesn't know?" the man asked. "No, he doesn't," Sarah answered casually. Alan clenched his fists. He has no idea what kind of woman he married. Alan listened in disbelief, a bitter taste in his mouth, as the man's voice continued. "So, what's the issue?" "Trouble in paradise." Sarah's smug tone made Alan's skin crawl. "He's fine," she replied, sounding arrogant. "I taught him everything he knows." The man sounded surprised. "You taught him? Was he a virgin when you got married, believe it or not?" Sarah answered, "He was a 23-year-old virgin. Can you imagine? Total Bible thumper. Doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't even curse. He'd probably faint if I said damn around him." The man chuckled. "Damn, sounds like a real square." "Why do you stay with him?" "Do you love him, I guess," sort of, Sarah replied carelessly. "He's good with the kids and doesn't ask questions when I'm out late." "But God, he's boring. The kids, are they his?" the man asked. Sarah responded indifferently. "Who knows? Who cares?" "He thinks they are, and that's what matters." "So what's next for you?" the man asked. "Living it up," Sarah said excitedly. "Maybe hit some orgies, retire somewhere tropical with my secret bank account." "Any plans for this weekend?" the man asked. "I know a few guys who'd love to join us." Alan stopped the recording and leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed by the betrayal. 15 years of his life, thrown away for Sarah. His phone buzzed. It was Sarah calling. He answered in a flat tone. "Alan, you sound off. Are you okay?" she asked. "Rough day," Alan replied. "I'm wrapping up work. Got another big client. I'll be home in an hour, and I'm still without underwear." "You waiting?" Sarah teased. "Sure," he said. "Love you," she chirped. "Me too," he muttered before ending the call. He wondered if she'd noticed he didn't say "I love you" back, but quickly realized he didn't care. Alan printed out the most damning photos from the evidence and sat at the kitchen table, preparing for the confrontation ahead. 1 hour passed, then 2, still no sign of Sarah. Worry crept in, and despite himself, Alan called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. He left a message and sent a text but received no response. Almost 4 hours later, the home phone rang. Alan answered, tired and anxious. Alan Miller speaking. "Mr. Miller, this is Angela Barnes from Grace Hospital. Your wife has been in an accident. Can you come down right away?" Alan's heart pounded. "Is she okay? What happened?" "I can't give details over the phone," Angela said. "Her doctor will explain when you arrive." "Please check in." At the courtesy desk, Alan grabbed the envelope with the photos and rushed to the hospital. At the hospital, the receptionist at the courtesy desk checked her computer and asked a colleague to escort Alan to the ICU. As Alan waited, a police officer approached him. "Mr. Miller, I'm Officer Simpson. I was at the scene of your wife's accident." "What happened?" Alan asked urgently. "A motorcycle, weaving between cars, struck her as she crossed the street." The rider was a stockbroker under the influence of drugs. I'm sorry, the officer said, handing Alan a card. Call if you need anything. Before Alan could respond, a doctor arrived. Alan Miller? I'm Dr. Blake. How is my wife? Alan asked. She has multiple fractures, internal injuries, and severe head trauma. We've placed her in a medically induced coma to reduce the swelling in her brain. Dr. Blake hesitated. There's something else. Did you know about her chlamydia? Alan nodded. I found out this morning. I'm being treated good, the doctor replied, but we suspect she may be HIV positive as well. We're testing for it now. Have you been tested? Not yet, Alan admitted. You need to see your doctor immediately, Dr. Blake advised. If you test positive, with the right medications and precautions, you can still live a relatively normal life. Alan nodded numbly. How long will she be here? It's too soon to say. It could be weeks, maybe longer. Dr. Blake led Alan to Sarah's room, where his breath caught at the sight of her. Bandaged, bruised, with one leg in a full cast, her face was swollen and stitched from cuts. She looked like she'd survived a war. Alan said a silent prayer before slowly taking off his wedding ring and placing it in the envelope with the incriminating photos. He wrote Sarah's name on it and called softly to a nurse. Can you make sure she gets this when she wakes up? Of course, the nurse replied. Alan placed the envelope on the tray by Sarah's bed, took one last look at her, and removed her rings, pocketing them. Goodbye, Sarah, he whispered before leaving. Exhausted, Alan collapsed into bed at home. Over the next 3 weeks, he found a 2-bedroom apartment for Sarah, paying the deposit and the first 2 months' rent from their shared accounts. 2 weeks after that night at the hospital, Alan got a clean bill of health from his doctor. He tested negative for HIV. Though the physical pain was fading, Alan knew the emotional wounds would take far longer to heal. 3 weeks after the accident, Sarah woke from her coma. Alan dropped Lorna and Gloria at his parents' house, explained where he was going, and then headed to the hospital, preparing for another difficult conversation. At the nurse's station, Alan saw the doctor standing nearby and a man holding a manila envelope, clearly a process server. How's she doing? Alan asked the doctor. She's conscious and her vitals are stable. The antibiotics have cleared up the infection, the doctor replied. Alan nodded and walked into Sarah's room, the process server discreetly following. Sarah glanced at the opened envelope on her bedside table. Alan, she said weakly. Sarah. Alan responded coolly. So, you all found out? Sarah said, motioning to the envelope. Yes, Alan confirmed. How did you know? She asked. You passed your illness to me, Alan replied. After that, I followed you. I have evidence, photos, videos, recordings, more than enough to prove infidelity. He nodded to the process server, who stepped forward. Are you Sarah Miller? He asked formally. Yes, Sarah answered. He handed her the envelope, snapped a picture, and said, You've been served, before leaving the room. Sarah's face crumpled. You couldn't even wait until I was out of the hospital. No, Alan said firmly. You were planning to run. I just sped up your timeline by a few years. Do the girls know? She asked. Yes, and they're not your biggest fans right now. That's why they're not here, Alan said coldly. Don't worry, I'm seeking full custody with visitation rights if they want to see you. But right now, they want nothing to do with you. I guess you hate me, too, she said quietly. How long will I be in here? The doctor says at least another week, Alan replied. Where will I go when I'm discharged? I rented an apartment for you, Alan said. All your things have been moved, and utilities are in your name. He handed her an envelope. This is your share of our joint accounts, minus the deposit and 2 months' rent. Sarah took the envelope with trembling hands. Oh, and I know about your secret account, Alan added. My lawyer has frozen it. Sign the divorce papers, and she'll unlock it minus my half, of course. Sarah's face registered shock. I'll fight you for it, she threatened. That would be unwise, Alan warned, unless you want all that evidence made public. It's quite graphic. Have your lawyer look over the papers, sign them, and we can end this sham of a marriage quickly. I'm so sorry, Sarah whispered. I don't believe you, Alan said flatly. Sign the papers. As Alan turned to leave, Sarah called after him. Can I call the girls? Alan paused at the door. You can try, he said, but they might not answer. Thank you, she whispered. Alan walked out of the hospital, ignoring the disapproving glances from some of the nurses. Their opinions didn't matter anymore. Epilogue: the divorce was finalized swiftly. Alan tested negative for HIV, narrowly avoiding a crisis, and Sarah also tested negative. Emma, his lawyer, handed him a check for $2 million, representing half of Sarah's hidden account. Alan deposited the money into college funds for Lorna and Gloria. Life moved on, and after some time, the girls spoke to Sarah again, who apologized. It took a year, but eventually they spent time with her once more.